Alright guys, welcome back to F1 News. With Red Bull extending their advantage at the top of both championships, the main area they are focusing on to improve their car right now has been revealed. They believe another 0.3 of a second could be unlocked if they make these additions for the rest of the season, but that might be the final major thing they feel like is an easy fix, an easy upgrade on the car. Very much enjoyed your thoughts in the comment section below. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you're new as always, I would greatly appreciate it. Really upset the channel. Thanks so much indeed for doing that one. Firstly, we're going to mention the power rankings. I'm not really going to talk through them today. They were always very questionable. I just thought I'd share them to be honest and move on, because lots of discussion about the kind of driver grid for next season, the driver lineup. Rumour has it that Mick Schumacher's seat at Haas is not exactly safe. Now, we heard a while ago now that potentially his seat was in jeopardy. We know that the Haas team in general aren't particularly happy with him crashing the car every other week, and we thought that potentially the Ferrari link of Haas, well, of course, not Ferrari Haas or Haas Ferrari, whatever they're called technically, would maybe keep his seat safe, right? And it makes sense why they might continue him on there for another season, but that's far from guaranteed. We heard a while ago that he might be gone, but that Ferrari were probably going to keep him in place unless there's another driver with Ferrari tyres they might want to put in instead. Apparently, Antonio Giovinazzi is at least in consideration to replace Schumacher in the Haas next season. That'd be rather interesting just because Giovinazzi kind of, in a way, a proven known quantity. Schumacher arguably hasn't done enough to merit maintaining his seat for next year, but I feel like by the end of the season he might have done. We shall see. But this would be certainly an interesting change, because this actually, as Joe Seward points out in his kind of a blog that he does after the fact, this is kind of a little snippet from it right here. I'll leave a link down below for you guys. But effectively saying that, it seems like Alpine are going to maintain their driver lineup for next year, Ocon and Alonso. That means they need to find a spot for Piastri. Apparently he's going to go to Williams, but apparently this isn't a done deal yet, because he saw Mark Webber, Piastri's manager, talking in animated fashion to various people to try and seemingly get this deal done. So we'll see what happens there. But also, Haas might be interested in Piastri, but the truth is that Ferrari has a say in the second Haas driver, as Mick Schumacher is not delivering the goods. The word is that Haas will probably end up with Ferrari's reserve driver Antonio Giovinazzi in 2023. So far from a guarantee. I'm not sure exactly how good Joe Seward's kind of hit rate is on stuff like this, but certainly something to keep in mind. But he does seem to agree that Alpine are going to maintain their kind of driver lineup. Alonso was rumoured a little bit ago to potentially be going to another team. That doesn't seem likely anymore. I think he's been doing a great job as of late, as generally has Ocon. So probably they keep those two there. And Piastri, they definitely don't want to lose Piastri to another organisation. They might well loan him out to Williams. That seems the more likely possibility right now. So things taking shape, but the Haas driver lineup is still very much in question. And that's the whole thing, that Latifi probably is going to be out of Williams. He himself even admits that his kind of performance effectively must change if he wants to keep his seat in Formula 1 next year. Looks rather unlikely that that's going to happen, to be honest, especially because every weekend Latifi seems to be involved in some sort of drama or controversy, or deciding the fate of the championship, just small matters like that. Let's talk Ferrari real quick. Ferrari says the new low drag rear wing it introduced in Baku helped it cut the straight line speed deficit to the Red Bull, which of course has been kind of a key importance. But of course, look, if the car can't finish the race, that's not going to be ideal at the end of the day. And who knows how things would have played out if the race had continued, if Leclerc was able to keep running with this engine as it was, because he had about a 12-second barrier over Verstappen at that point of the race, about lap 20. If Magnussen's car also would have broken down as it did on lap 35, whatever it was, right, and the safety car would have come out, the virtual safety car, then potentially at that point Leclerc still has a bit of a lead, and therefore he can pit again with that kind of safety car advantage, take the new set of tyres, so he doesn't have to worry about the fact that his tyres would have been about 10 laps older than Verstappen's, and potentially take it to the end of the race, right? Who knows what would have happened? But of course, look, the Ferrari engine didn't really want to comply on that front. Now, rumour has it that, at least that's actually from Ferrari themselves, not really a rumour, Charles's engine arrived at the factory tomorrow, and an initial assessment should be completed. Rumour has it, though, that effectively the engine's, it's done and dusted, all those components are effectively just ruined forever. Now, rumour has it also, they might want to try and use the first turbo they used in the kind of Canada, in the Montreal race, so that they can get away with not having to take an engine penalty yet. But it's far from a guarantee whether that part is actually fully operable, right? They're going to examine things. They also say they've examined Sainz's car, the hydraulic parts of that, and they say a short-term fix is in place for Carlos Sainz's hydraulic components. But they're looking at kind of mid to long-term solutions, which obviously is not ideal. Now, by all accounts, the Ferrari is a worse race car than the Red Bull is so far this season, and one of the reasons for that seems to be the Red Bull has a pretty stable rear axle, tends to understeer a bit, which Verstappen generally doesn't like. We'll see that here in a second. The Ferrari is kind of the other way around, so effectively Red Bull are going to try and dial this in for Verstappen's driving style over time. But generally what this does mean is, because it's got a stable rear end, it does give an advantage in the race by putting less pressure on the tyres. We've seen, especially from kind of Imola and onwards, that the tyre degradation for the Red Bull has been better than the Ferraris. And we have seen talk so far this season that Verstappen isn't quite so comfortable with this car as, let's say, he was with last year's, and apparently they're trying to drive that in his direction, right? The underside, of course, it makes sense for them to do so. Ferrari would drive their direction of their car development in kind of the likeness of what Leclerc likes, right? So, of course, Red Bull can actually finish a race, which is very ideal. But on this talking point, this is the key weakness from Red Bull's perspective, right? Because the Red Bull car, they well realize, like, their car is in prime position to take both championships this year. They just don't, effectively, if they just don't make any mistakes, the car doesn't explode, it doesn't kind of, as long as it finishes every race for the rest of the season, in theory, they should probably win the championship the way things are going right now, unless other teams, really Ferrari is the only one in contention, can take another significant step. They realize that, okay, their car in terms of aerodynamics is very good indeed. They probably will make a fair, further tweaks through the rest of the season, change some things around, switch some things up with the car, like whatever they can afford to do effectively within the budget cap. But in terms of effectively a free lap time reduction, the focus still is on the weight. So apparently the RB18 is still about 8 kilograms above the minimum weight limit. I think it's 798, the minimum weight limit. And apparently the Ferrari is pretty much already close to on that number. So Red Bull know that they have effectively another 8 kilos to gain, which could be about, quarter of a second a lap. So if they can potentially do that, unlock that weight, that might be what they decide to do instead of the other developments, so that they can effectively guarantee, in theory, if the car's the same with less weight, effectively like a guaranteed quarter of a second lap time increase, which would put them even further ahead of the pack right now. Now, of course, it's a Pareto principle, 80-20 rule type thing, where when you get down to those final few kilograms, those are the hardest to lose. We've seen this at their weight-saving adventures, for example, with the DRS flap seemingly were causing Verstappen problems in, of course, Spain, and even more recently than that as well. The end of Baku, they told him not to use the DRS because, it potentially could break, cause some issues, as with what we saw happen to Yuki Tsunoda's car, right? So it seems like that's what Red Bull are going to try and do. Of course, like, it's expensive to manage to do this, but, if they feel like they can make it work within the budget cap, then they're going to be pushing very aggressively indeed to try and take that minimum weight off wherever they possibly can, get down to those numbers, and extend their advantage at the front. Because the way their car's looking right now, at least in terms of race pace, if they can get another 0.25 seconds a lap, we're not really sure how much Ferrari particularly think that they can unlock, but if they can achieve this, Red Bull, then probably the championship is out of reach for the other teams if reliability continues to stay in their favour. And this, of course, is the other thing, right, that we saw that the second power unit that Ferrari brought in had more power, right? Effectively, they unlocked it a bit more with theoretically greater reliability in that second power unit. Didn't really work out like that, right? So seemingly Honda have been like, okay, well, Red Bull powertrains have said, okay, look, let's just not even bother. Let's keep our kind of engine as it is. Incredibly efficient engine. And apparently it shows barely any signs of wear. It's been going for like 7 races now, that first power unit, and barely showed any degradation in performance. That's very impressive indeed. But there was no power increase with the second power unit, right? So they've said, look, we're going to keep the same effectively spec as before. Ferrari tried to upgrade theirs and push theirs a bit further, but of course, that kind of backfired on them quite significantly. I wanted to talk Mercedes real quick, because if Ferrari can't compete with Red Bull, the only other team in contention would be Mercedes, if all of a sudden they have a kind of a race-winning car, which they don't believe they have right now. But interestingly enough, there was a lot of talk about porpoising this weekend, porpoising, bouncing, bottoming out of the car, all these different terms were getting thrown around. Mercedes explained that a bit as to kind of what that means on their car specifically, that they do believe they've kind of solved, or at least take a significant step towards solving the porpoising problem that affected them at the start of the season, which they effectively fixed, or they said they fixed and understood in Spain. Now, according to James Volz, effectively what that did was, by getting rid of the porpoising and allowing them to run the car lower, that then kind of effectively unleashed or unearthed another problem the car has, which is the bottoming out of the car on the kind of bounces on the circuits, right? So in Spain, the track is very flat, like they could effectively run the car lower, generating more downforce, but not actually bounce around on the circuit, which is effectively what has been happening since then, right? They've reduced the porpoising, therefore they can run the car lower, but then by running the car lower, they're now hitting the bounces on the track and having significant problems with that. So that's going to take another fair few upgrades as well. And I think the kind of theory is for Mercedes that other teams, when they get to that point, are also going to find similar issues, such that we have to, think about the regulations effectively, is what Mercedes was saying, to prevent these issues occurring for the actual health of the drivers, right? And they said that they effectively pushed it too far in terms of the setup at Hamilton and Russell, with what they experienced in Baku, and they're going to not do that again. So the bouncier tracks certainly seem to be causing them an awful lot of issues. It's not necessarily the porpoising, it's the bouncing. The suspension seems to be definitely in contention right now. And this, of course, is the circuit of Montreal. Not, again, in terms of bounces and stuff, in terms of track design, not all that dissimilar to Baku. Like, it should be better, I think, for Mercedes, but it's definitely not going to be like Spain was, I would say. This, of course, is a circuit, 3 DRS zones, down the start-finish straight, a bit of a back curve, and then also kind of the main straight down the back sub. Yeah, this is the Canada track we're going to in just a couple of days' time. The double header between Baku and Montreal makes really no sense at all from the FIA's perspective in terms of organising these races, but look, it is what it is. We've heard news, apparently, from the FIA that are actually going to change around next season to actually make the calendar make a bit more sense in terms of when these races are and kind of which race comes after another, because this is pretty difficult for the teams and the drivers and everyone involved to turn around from one week to the next. A couple of things to mention before we close out the video. I thought this is kind of remarkable. Max Verstappen became this past weekend the youngest driver to reach 25 F1 race victories, about half a year or so younger than Sebastian Vettel. Vettel was 25 years, 103 days when he won his 25th race in Formula 1. Schumacher, Alonso, and then Lewis Hamilton actually here at 29 years old. But interesting enough, it's actually Lewis Hamilton who drove less races or finished less races than Verstappen for those 25 victories. Just goes to show to a degree how young Verstappen was when he started in the sport and how many races there kind of are in these modern seasons, that Hamilton, despite being 5 years older for his 25th race victory, actually had less race finishes. But you can see some serious legends up here. I mean, Jim Clark, 45 race finishes for 25 race victories. Unbelievable scenes. And the dominance here of some of the old guard, Schumacher and even Vettel, right? 77, like in kind of the modern era in a way. 77 race finishes for 25 race victories was incredible. Like, just the dominance that Vettel had over those kind of 4-year periods was pretty much unprecedented in the kind of modern day of the sport. But very much intrigued to get your thoughts on all this stuff in the comment section below. Hit the like button if you enjoyed. Subscribe if you're new. As always, take care of yourselves. I'll see you next time.